Thanks. We'll start with the Wall Street Journal in the third row here in front of me, please.
Thank you very much. Dan Michaels with the Wall Street Journal. You mentioned that ministers expressed concern about the war in the Middle East. Did it come up anything beyond that? Clearly it's not NATO territory, but the members are involved more or less and have many of them have strikingly different positions. For example, the U.S. and Turkey are on pretty much opposite sides of this. So curious how you reconcile that. And curious whether this figures into any of the work of the group of experts on the southern neighborhood, considering that we've had migrant crises coming out of the Middle East in the past. Thank you very much.
Allies welcome the extension of the pause in those hostilities and welcome the fact that hostages are released and that there is now a relief for the people in Gaza, and also that more humanitarian aid can be delivered. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that NATO as an alliance does not play an active role in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Some allies are active in different ways, but NATO as an organization is not directly involved. We are present in the wider Middle East region. We have a training mission in Iraq to help to fight ISIS. We have a close partnership with many Arabic states in the Gulf, in North Africa, and in the Middle East, including a very close partnership with Jordan, where we do some defense capacity building activities. The King of Jordan just visited NATO. And I'll also actually in the near future also visit the Gulf region to meet with NATO partners there. Therefore, one of the messages from NATO is that it is important that this conflict does not escalate to a bigger regional conflict. And the message to Iran is that they should not use or to seize the instability, the conflict we now see, to further escalate, and they have to rein in their proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. Allies are active in different ways, but NATO as an alliance is not directly involved in this particular conflict. When it comes to the group of experts, well, it's a bit too early to say exactly what they will conclude, but of course part of the instability we see in our southern neighborhood is also linked to the instability and the conflicts we have seen for decades in the Middle East. So I expect them also to address the challenges and how NATO can play a role also to help to stabilize this region, for instance, by working more closely with our partners, Israel, but also many Arabic countries.
We'll go to VG in the back here, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Alf Johnson from VG. One can get the impression that Western countries express their opinion different on Russia's violation of human rights, and when friendly countries like Israel limits access for civilians in Gaza to the same protection. In your opinion, are there different standards here on friends and adversaries when it comes to criticizing them?
So my message is that international law, humanitarian law, has to be respected in all conflicts, and civilian lives has always to be protected, and that has been the message both on the conflict in Gaza, but also, of course, when it comes to other conflicts we see around the world. So upholding international law, upholding humanitarian law is important regardless of the type of conflict. Then I think it's also important to recognize that the situation in Gaza and the situation in Ukraine is different in many ways. Ukraine never posed a threat to Russia. Ukraine never attacked Russia. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was an unprovoked invasion, full-scale invasion of another country. Of course, Ukraine has the right to self-defense against an unprovoked attack, and to uphold territorial integrity, and also to support Ukraine's right for self-defense is something that all allies agree on, not least because the right for self-defense is enshrined in the UN Charter. So international law, humanitarian law, applies on all conflicts, and we continue to support Ukraine because this is about protecting international law.
Go next to the Sydney Morning Herald, please, here. Fourth row.
Secretary General Latika Burke from the Sydney Morning Herald. Just on China, where exactly do you want to land NATO's strategy on China? You raised economic coercion. What's actually in your toolkit to stop or hedge against that? And do you think you'll have your liaison office opened in Tokyo by the time you cease to be SG?
Well, I think we need to realize that NATO has come a long way when it comes to China, because not so many years ago, we didn't address the challenges that China poses to our security at all. It was not mentioned in our previous strategic concept at all with a single word. The first time actually we had some agreed language at NATO was in 2019, and since then we have developed a common position, a common approach, realizing that yes, China is in Asia, and China is not was a land border with NATO allies, but what China does matters for our security. We see that China is heavily modernizing their armed forces. We see the way they are coercing neighbors and other countries, not least around the South China Sea. We see China's disregard for human rights. And of course, all of this matters for our security. And just to recognize that is actually something which NATO didn't do before, but allies agree on that today. I also have to underline that NATO will remain an alliance, a regional alliance of North America and Europe. But this region faces global threats and challenges, and one of the challenges we face is the security consequences of China's behavior, also that they are working more and more closely together with Russia. So then many of the things we do are relevant for addressing the challenges posed by China without having a necessary China label on that. For instance, over the last years, we have started to do much more when it comes to developing technology. We have established a new innovation fund. We have established a network of also centers to develop technology, and this is also to ensure that we maintain our technological edge, as we see China is investing heavily in new disruptive technologies. When we work with our partners in the Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan and South Korea, and actually now have started to invite them to our summits, that's also part of what we do to address the challenges that China poses to us and our partners in the Indo-Pacific. And not least, when we now are stepping up what we do on protecting our critical infrastructure, that is also partly because of the challenges we see China poses to us. Not so many years ago, the issue of 5G was assessed as purely an economic commercial decision. Then actually, not least because of the discussions and the work we did here at NATO, allies realized that who controls the 5G networks is also about our security, and therefore allies have been much more consensus and much more aware of the security risks related to 5G. So be it 5G, be it technology, being working with partners, resilience, and of course also ensuring that we have credible deterrence defense, all of this is relevant for NATO's response to China, and I expect that when we meet in Washington, we will further develop this agenda as a United Alliance.
We have time for just one or two more. We'll go to Bloomberg here, please.
Natalia Droziak from Bloomberg. So Finland has now announced that it would seal off its entire eastern border with Russia. What does NATO assess that Russia is trying to achieve by pushing asylum seekers to Finland's border? And what do you think the impact is of a border going up between Europe and Russia here? Thank you.
Well, I think this is another example of how Russia is using many different tools to put pressure on neighbors. We have seen them using energy. We have seen them using cyber attacks. We have seen them using different kinds of clandestine operations to try to undermine our democracies. I just visited the Balkans, where we have seen them being present and also trying to undermine some of the governments we have in the Western Balkans, not least in Montenegro some years ago. So these are so the fact that Russia is now using migration as a tool is yet another example of the attempt to have put pressure on neighbors, NATO allies. They will not succeed because we stand together, we support each other, and I welcome therefore also the decision by the European border agency Frontex to actually support and assist Finland. There has been no request for a NATO increased presence. Border control is something that allies do themselves, also sometimes with support from EU agencies, and I'm absolutely confident that Finland is capable of dealing with this themselves, and therefore I trust that they have absolutely made the right decision when it comes to controlling their borders.
Very last question to Ansa here, please, in the third row.
Thank you, Secretary General Mattia Bagnoli, ANSA, the National Italian News Agency. Secretary General, in few days there will be a ministerial in Skopje, North Macedonia, a NATO ally. Most of the ministers present today will travel to Skopje. I said most because, for instance, the Baltic states and Ukraine, they said that they won't participate to the ministerial because of the expected presence of Mr. Lavrov. I just wanted to ask you if the issue did come up today in the discussions, and if you personally think that it is appropriate for Mr. Lavrov to travel right now in a NATO country. Thank you.
Well, it's for the OSCE to organize their meetings. The OSCE has played an important role for many years. NATO allies are, as individual countries, members of the OSCE, and it's for the OSCE to organize their meetings. So I don't have any advice to give to another organization. My responsibility is to organize NATO meetings, and then the OSCE organize their meetings.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for now. The Secretary General will be back to brief you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.